The draft is in the books, and everybody's made it to town, but they're not done building this roster. What comes next today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome in, everybody, on your Monday following the NFL draft. We have a great show for you as they round out the team that will come to rookie minicamp, OTAs, and eventually on to training camp. We're brought to you today by Monopoly Go. You can get in the game with your friends right now. Just click and go to download Monopoly Go right here for free on the App Store and in Google Play. The mobile hit is a twist on the old classic game, and you're going to love it. We're going to love it today. This is Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. He's going to run it all down for you as he does all the time on what the team does going forward. We shift now post-draft towards how do you fit things in the cap, what is the salary implications, how everything comes together as they're adding a lot of players here to try to get ready for OTAs and later on to camp. We're going to run down the long shot UDFAs later in the show, the impact UDFAs that they've already brought in that we think could be either practice squad or even push for the roster. But first, we want to dig into everything that this draft brought for value. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting. And if you're still looking for information on these players, you can get the draft guide and the athletic matrix at rogueapc.com. You can also find my breakdowns of who did well in this draft, who had some problems, and et cetera, et cetera. I was along with the rest of my staff over at NFL33.com, and you can always find me on RGR Football. The text line is where you want to get the absolute fastest information when something crazy happens. And you know, Veach, it could happen here soon. So get on the text line at 816-357-8781. We have a lot for you. As we break this down and take a step back, I know we've been deep in the details all weekend, but for you, Chris, when you take a look at what they accomplished with the draft class overall, not getting into the UDFAs yet, where do you feel that they are here? Are you plus? Are you minus? Not so much to give a grade, but we can. But like, where are you at with how they've done on the roster?
I think just looking at the draft class, it's really hard for me to feel like they have any holes left. Like, you look at the roster and you've got a new wide receiver that you needed. You've got a new offensive tackle that could compete for your left tackle position. You've got somebody that can come in and at least help take some of the pressure off of Travis Kelce. The one area that they didn't touch would be interior defensive line, and we talked about that a lot as a need. But the way that the draft went, there really wasn't a spot to take somebody unless you're going to overdraft in a lot of areas. So it didn't shock me. But if you're looking at just the 2024 season, which is basically the way I'm looking at this, I think you got to feel pretty good about the interior defensive line. They brought everybody back from last year, and they did pretty well last year. So I think overall, I think they're in good shape.
I would agree with you. I thought maybe they would select someone on day 3. They didn't end up doing that, but we're going to talk about a guy later that they did get into the fold after the UDFAs came around. But you're right. This is certainly set up for 2025. The question becomes beyond that, right? And what happens next? So I won't rule it out. If we go through the OTA process and even camp, and you see a veteran defensive lineman the Chiefs feel can get after the passer a bit, come free, I think depending on the cap situation at the time, it's still a possibility to add on there, but they're certainly comfortable going to battle with what they have.
And we don't have any of the information to really give you an update on the cap. They probably lost a couple $1 million in cap space as soon as they signed their free agents, which won't happen for a couple of weeks. But at this point, they're sitting there with almost $20 million in cap space, a little over $20 million in cap space, minus a couple million for the new UDFAs and the free agents that are in the draft picks. So you're probably still sitting at 17, closer to 18 million maybe, and you're in a situation where you could sign just about anybody that's still out there in free agency, or you could make a trade for somebody. And this is the time of year where it's possible that teams are going to be looking to trade veterans because maybe they went and drafted a replacement.
Yeah, there is a possibility. There's a lot of guys that have something going on that could force them out, could let somebody overtake their job, or there could be experiments that just don't go to shape. I think the key here is the practice squad. Chiefs have utilized it maybe better than most in terms of having the expansion of 16 players on it that they can get someone onto the practice squad and go from there with elongated evaluation time and a little bit of coach them up time to see what you can get out of them. And so I do think there could be a revolving door there. We're going to talk about some of the guys that are going to make it there. The class as a whole, for me, it hits the big notes that we talked about on night 1 and night 2. I felt like they got good value on day 3. And as you look at it as a whole, I thought they'd go another wide receiver. They chose not to. We know that they have practice squad content there that Field can do. And quite frankly, I think the volume of wide receiver that they have, they might be looking to not have to carry 7, maybe not even carry 6, although I think 6 is probably most likely. But knowing that they have a couple of guys coming back and they have a couple of guys that got onto the field last year but weren't able to produce a whole lot, there's still a lot of options there. And so maybe that's why we're not seeing a ton at the wide receiver room. And I'm going to be okay with that. Well, I think the really interesting thing is how you augment what you already do.
And there's questions whether or not they believe that they needed to add multiple wide receivers, because, I mean, they could figure – Brett Veach came out before the draft and said that Kadarius Toney is still the most talented wide receiver that they have on the roster. Now, that was before the draft. Whether or not he still feels that way is another question. And when you look at what Toney's skill set is and what he's able to do, it's hard to argue that maybe that's probably true. The question is can he produce? Can he stay healthy? Can he contribute to the roster? And that's the big question. I mean, so if he sticks on the roster with Worthy and Rashee Rice is going to miss time. We don't know how much time he's going to miss. He's going to miss time, but Hollywood Brown is now here. Justin Watson's going to be back this year. Sky Moore's still on the roster, and I know a lot of people have written Moore off, but he's still on the roster for a reason. I thought if they were going to move Moore, they would have done it during the draft. At this point, I still think Moore is going to be on the roster because you're not going to gain anything from cutting him. Same thing with Kadarius Toney. So those guys are going to be here through OTAs, through training camp, and we'll see whether or not they're able to make the roster. And then you got new guys from last year like Nico Remigio, who could be pushing for a roster spot at the wide receiver position, especially as a returner.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I think we talked about CJ Hansen yesterday, probably my favorite pick of day 3 in terms of a guy that can continue to add to a room that, despite its strength, has to remain strong for the future. So again, I think they got good value. How do you add to value? That's by bringing in long shots, guys that have something that they do well that you feel you might be able to tease more out of or can contribute in a way right now. Those are UDFAs. The impact guys are coming up here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I really, really enjoyed this time of year because the draft ends and I get to relax a little bit. I get to enjoy some things like NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs. They're all there. And now baseball is getting into full swing. So you can take advantage this time of year and make the most of it. And you can do that at FanDuel, where you can bet on every single game of any of those contests. Right now, new customers are getting $150 back in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $150 back, no matter what. End of story. Cut, print, done. Win or lose, that's going back to you. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to three-pointers. You can get it all. It's safe, secure, and easy to use on the app. There's no reason to wait any longer. Get after it at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And then what you get to do is go that much farther. If that time of year is now ticking up and you got football in the brain, and you're just going to kind of watch out of the corner of your eye, now you can get into the action. And that means you can get 2 games maybe that you never thought that you could. You can pick up any kind of specific game for any of those contests, all venue picks of music and performance otherwise as well. They're all in one place, and you can get last-minute deals. They're all there, from views from your seat. The lowest price is guaranteed. Gametime is going to help you out and take all the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets, NHL playoff tickets, baseball, all of it. So get after it. The last-minute deals and the flash deals are my favorite. You can even set up a zone that is that kind of area that you want to be within the venue and get zone deals as well. You save up to 60% buying your tickets last minute for sports, comedy, theater, all of it, all in one spot. Those deals come together in the Gametime app. So all you got to do is take the guesswork out of buying any of these tickets, including NBA. and download the Gametime app. Set up an account and use our code LOCKEDONNFL. You get $20 off your first purchase. Hands down, super deal right off the bat. Terms apply. And again, you create the account, redeem that code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, for $20 off. That's Gametime. It's last minute tickets, it's lowest prices, and it's guaranteed. Make sure you check out the Locked On Sports Today feed, whether it is now that OTA season or you're looking for NHL or NBA news. It's all there 24/7 on Locked On Sports Today here on YouTube and on Amazon Fire. Go check that for all your information needs. I need information too, and I want to feel like a guarantee is out there. That's not what happens for UDFAs. But there are some guys that come in and sign on teams that have more of an upside, that can make an impact, if not onto the 53, at least onto the practice squad. And those are the guys that we want to talk about first. We had a couple of targets that I was really hopeful. Jalen Coker from Holy Cross was one of them, right? Put him with his teammate. Signed elsewhere. Gabriel Murphy signed elsewhere. But the Chiefs got a couple of really interesting guys that I think can help this roster. Let's run those down. Who stood out to you?
Well, I'm going to give you your favorite one first in UCLA running back Carson Steele. Go ahead.
It's a long tradition. It's from Sherm to Mike. If you guys have not seen Mike Burton's appearances over on RGR with me, a lot of fun. I talk fullback. That's what I enjoy. Now, Carson Steele's a tweener. He actually led them in rushing yards at UCLA last season. He can be a fullback, but he can be a power back. I see three things from him right now. Yes, I think he can get out and lead block. And I think for Andy, he's always wanted to have a fullback. This year without having a fullback was a little weird. It hurt me inside. And I think Andy's trying to make up for that. Thanks, Coach. I appreciate you. But I understand that he doesn't want to pay on veterans at this point for that particular position. So you go and you try to find a guy that's got enough athleticism that can carry the rock, like Sherm did when everybody went down and he had to be the primary ball carrier against the Broncos. You want to have somebody that has some get up and go to him, but can actually fulfill a couple of things. So he can lead block. I think he can carry the ball, particularly in short yardage. He should be a short yardage back, and I really like that concept more than I do Clyde. I know Clyde's back and he's going to help carry the load, but short yardage specifically, I want somebody with some power. That's what Carson Steele brings. And the X factor for him is he can catch the ball out of the backfield. And that's the number one goal that you have to be a running back on this particular roster. So I don't care if you call him a fullback or an H or running back. I like his fit, and I think he's got an outside chance to make the roster.
Shocker that one of your favorite additions as a UDFA is a fullback. I will go ahead and give you your second favorite. Well, actually, this may have even been your first. Florida State defensive tackle, Fabian Lovett Sr.
Yeah, I like what he does. He's not the hype guy. There's other guys on that defensive front that are going to take all the credit, but he does the dirty work, and he's got the profile that Joe Cullen and Steve Spagnuolo really covet. He's got power, and he's got length. He's got 35.5-inch arms. It's longer than anybody else on this roster at this point in terms of availability, and certainly the longest in this interior defensive lineman class for this draft. So the fact you didn't have to spend a draft pick on him, I think is a huge win. Now, we know that he spent a lot of time with Joe Cullen, not only at the pro day at FSU, but had a visit as well. That tells me that even though sometimes we get visits and they don't go near him, that doubling up tells me that Joe Cullen feels there's something to work with. The fact that they brought him in, they get him as a UDFA. I know they brought everybody back, but you got to think about the future too. Isaiah Buggs is still sitting out there. They put him on the practice squad, a guy who formerly started in the NFL, sat on the practice squad last year. I think he's got a shot right now, Fabian Lovett, to make the practice squad and sit for a season and come along. And then when we have to rethink about the IDLs next year, who's going to play next to Chris Jones, I think that's when he becomes a factor.
Well, yeah, because you only have one guy, I think, that is under contract next year, and it's the defensive tackle that they got from the Raiders. So that's the only defensive tackle other than Chris Jones you have on that is actually on the roster with a contract in 2025, other than any of the UDFAs that they're signing right now. So that's definitely something that they have to be watching out for is some interior defensive line depth. So there is another impact guy. And then I'll give you another one, Penn State linebacker Curtis Jacobs.
I like this pick as well. This is very much for me in the mold of Jack Cochran and Christensen, because he is, I got to double check this, 11 in linebacker matrix. He's LB 11 in this class for athleticism. He's a 90 plus, and any 90 plus athlete at the linebacker spot can play for you on special teams. So I do believe that he's got a little bit of instinctualness to him, much like I think Cochran does have. Cochran's held up better than I actually expected him to so far in his NFL career. I see Jacobs as similar. Can he push for the roster? Outside chance. If he does, or if there's an injury at the position, he's got the athleticism to come in and play the team's roles that Cochran's played in the past, that Cam Jones played last year, who we believe is probably linebacker 4 on this roster right now in Cam Jones. I think he's the next guy behind in the pipeline at linebacker.
Yeah, and if he can make a case for himself this year, I don't think that there's any reason that Cochran or Christensen could be knocked off the roster. I think it's possible. So there's definitely a place there for an additional linebacker. Last one for the impact UDFAs, Utah defensive back Miles Battle.
Now, this is really, really interesting. This is a position of strength on the Chiefs roster, right? We always talk about that. But despite the fact that I think an unheralded and one that we don't talk about a lot addition to this roster is that Jaden Hicks is coming on, and I think that gives Jalen Watson a little bit more confidence, a guy that he's played with before and has had backing him up before. I feel like Jalen Watson should be being pushed forward. I think he has the opportunity to take the starting job. I think Battle can push him a little bit, though, because of his athleticism, which is better than Jalen Watson tested as well. Now, you got to remember, testing is one thing and it's a point in time, right? But this kid is 6'3" and still runs a 4.37, slightly faster just by a hair than L'Jarius Sneed did at quite a bit more size, 32 and 3/8 arms. That's a nice measurement as well. He's explosive. All of his testing came back in a solid performance, but his number one thing is the fact he can turn and run and get cover ground downfield. And so I think that that's the one thing that Jalen's got to make up for. And I think this competition will breed the best out of both of them. He is a guy that I think has an outside chance to push on to the 5, depending on injuries and what the status of Nick Jones is. We do expect that there's going to be a shuffling at corner, obviously, without L'Jarius Sneed. And at the very worst, I think he's a practice squatter that has upside.
Well, and the interesting thing about Watson is I think he's played well when he's played for the most part, but I also think that he's been battling injuries his entire career in Kansas City that we haven't known about, because you look at what happens after the season ends up. I think both years he ended up having surgery of some sort on something. And you don't get that knowledge when we're going through the season. He's playing through it. So you're not really getting the full Jalen Watson that you may get early in the season because he's battling some kind of injury or some kind of tear. So that's a big question when you start talking about Watson is, can he stay healthy? If he can stay healthy, maybe he can contribute a little bit more than he has in the past couple of seasons at the end of the year.
I like it. And the size that Miles Battle brings actually trumps his. So I think that's a plus. And the other thing that Battle has that makes me think that he's got a shot here is because his change of direction. He's a sub 7 3-cone guy, which means he can get after it. His short area quickness score on the athletic matrix is markedly better than both Jalen Watson and Josh Williams. So that's a feather in his cap too. So watch for him in OTAs and certainly in camp.
Going to be a lot of fun to see what
anybody else.
We'll get to a couple more here in just a minute, and when we talk about some of the long shots. But rookie minicamp is going to be coming up pretty soon. They will be having multiple different tryout players there as well. We're not going to get into those today, but that is going to be something to watch, is to see what players they bring in for rookie tryouts, what guys that maybe they add to the roster after the rookie minicamp, which is going to be coming up shortly.
Yeah, we'll take a look at those guys. And tryout guys are always fun. We'll run them down if and when they make a camp here for OTAs. So let's get into who are the guys that have a shot, but maybe it's longer. Coming up next on the Locked On Podcast Network.
All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their billions or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like Digging for Treasure or Robot Pachinko Machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on.
I think what we want to do is take a look at the long shots, just like when you want the long view. You can get that on Locked On Sports today of all the major news stories. Sub to it here on the YouTube platform or find it on Amazon Fire TV. Long shot UDFAs, they're always great stories. Somebody's going to make a roster. Well, there's going to be a UDFA that makes this roster. That is the mathematical chance. So who are the longer shot guys that maybe have an aspect about them that we like? I don't know. You start. Who stands out to you?
Well, there's a couple guys that are still long shots, but have maybe a little bit of a better chance because of the position they play or what they can bring to the roster. One of those would be a local guy in Kansas State, wide receiver and returner, Phillip Brooks.
I like that. A little undersized, let's be real, but has some thickness to him. I think that's a possibility. I'm not going to call him Remigio, but Remigio I think, was in this position last year where the physicality was there and we had to see him perform. So there's nothing that could shock me more than a guy following in those footsteps, as I think Remigio has a chance to push to be a returner on this roster this season. So let's hope that the same thing can strike. If there's one thing that stands out, it's that the build is there, and I like what he brings in terms of contact balance and being able to withstand some hits. You're going to have to do that if you're going to play teams.
Yeah, and that's going to be the big question, and it's really going to be curious to see how the returners change this year, considering the new kickoff rules. So a lot of different things to consider there. Marshall offensive lineman Ethan Driscoll.
He's a guy that's got good length. I want to verify his numbers here. It's a tough one here. When you make an investment in a second-round pick to be a tackle, and you've got a second-round pick from last year that's a tackle, it's tough to push there. But he's huge. Size is his thing. His arms, 35 3/8. Just this much, an 1/8 inch shorter than our guy Lovett. So kudos to him. That gives him the edge. Now, playing at Marshall, level of competition, they can jump up. I'm going to go back and check him out against Notre Dame from last year and see what that was. But 6'8" and 313, I think he's listed at. To me, the visual says that it's quite a bit more than that. But hey, if you can list at that point, that's fine. I do think that overall, if he can get into camp and battle some of the guys that are on the backside of, say, Godric, guys that are fighting to be in the mix on the practice squad, I don't see any reason why he couldn't make it. 10.5-inch hands. I just don't know if the grip strength is enough to get him in position. So I really got to see him in action, probably in OTAs.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with the offensive tackle position overall, because you're right. You took Juan last year. You took Kingsley this year, and you have obviously you have Jawan Taylor, who is going to be your starter at right tackle, and you still have the kid from TCU as your fourth tackle right now. So you have guys, and generally Kansas City is going to take 4 tackles through the season. That's just generally what they're going to do. So I'm not expecting that this kid is somebody that can step in and be one of those 4 this year. But they brought him in because they want to see what he can do, and we'll see. Maybe in OTAs and during training camp, he can show that maybe he can make the practice squad, which would give him the opportunity to maybe be the 4th tackle next year in 2025, or maybe even later this year. We'll just have to see, because that position is always going to be something Kansas City is going to be trying to get better at, and especially younger at.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think between Godric, I would put CJ Hansen on the inside as an interior guy rather than a tackle.
Yep.
But he either has to beat out guys that have honestly had a lot invested into them, not just Wanye Morrison, obviously Kingsley now, but Lucas Niang is in the mix here as well. I don't know that they're going to part from Lucas unless there's a reason. So I think it's a long shot, but if you're going to take a gamble on a body, this is Orlando size with what I saw from an initial look, a little bit better feet.
Well, and the big thing when you talk about Lucas Niang is injury and whether or not he's actually gotten fully back from that injury. So that's going to be something to watch there. Last one that's still technically a long shot, but maybe somebody that has a positional need would be TCU running back Amani Bailey.
A lot of folks excited about this one, and I can understand why. I think when you're adding to the group, especially with Steele already in there, but not in a primary ball carrier type role, I think you can get excited. Now, he is undersized, let's be real, but at just under 5'7.5", he's over 200 pounds. And so you got to feel like the armor's there. He's not going to run away from you. 4'6", 40, and in the Matrix came in just under 90 at 89.6. I do think that his short area quickness makes up for some of it. So if he can get out of his own way, I think he's going to be all right. That 157 is perfectly fine for a 10 split. Again, this is another guy that I think I want to see get in the mix before I'm comfortable. I didn't watch a whole lot of TCU offensive film, so I can't say that he ever popped to me on tape. But if he does, and I'll go back and take a look at that as well, you can't leave any rock unturned at the running back position in this class.
Well, especially considering you only really have 2 running backs on the roster and then a couple of guys that are back into the roster guys so far. I mean, obviously Prince and P. Ryan can step up from last year, but that's really what you have on the roster right now. So this is a position where maybe he doesn't make the roster, but maybe he's a practice squad guy. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see, and it'll be curious to see what he's able to show during rookie minicamp and OTAs, and then once we get to training camp in a couple of months, which is going to be very exciting this year. I cannot wait for that. Let's go run down through, and I'm just going to do these. I'm going to list 3 names, I think. We'll just run down a couple of more guys that they added. Texas Tech tight end, Baylor Cupp. Oklahoma offensive lineman, McCade Metower, I think. And then Charlotte defensive end, Ayabi Oki Anoma.
In terms of ability, I think Ayabi Anoma is the guy in that trio. I can't say that the Texas Tech tight end stood out to me, but when you're trying to keep Pat happy, a little Red Raider can't go bad. The problem with Anoma is that journeyman, to say the least. He's got some pass rush ability. He can dip and he can bend, and he can. I think conversion to power is a question. I didn't find Charlotte film, so I have not seen him recently. But that's not the only program he's been with. He was a freshman at Alabama and kept Chris Raspberry behind him. So I think that's something to say. But off the field concerns, maturity, certainly. He's been in 5 programs in 6 seasons, including all the COVID years where you got to extend it. Never really sticking and landing anywhere. So it's going to be, who are you as a person right now, not just your athletic ability? That's probably the bigger question for him.
Right, and he seems to have the athletic ability going to Alabama, but it's not being able to stick. Even having to go to a place like Charlotte. I mean, that says a lot. 3 more names: BYU punter Ryan Reckhow, Villanova offensive lineman Nick Torres, and James Madison wide receiver Reggie Brown.
I think the thing that stands out to me here, nothing against the other guys, is that you need insurance as a punter, right? Obviously, brought in Areza, who's had an interesting path here, and I know off the field has been turmoil for him, right? His leg is incredible. So as long as the confidence hasn't been shaken, if his deliberateness and professionalism has continued, even though he hasn't been on a roster, if he knows this is his last shot, I don't expect anybody to push him. But the fact that you're bringing in at least an OTA punter to get another look at means you're covering your bases. I don't expect any of these guys to be an option once we go to training camp and get out of camp in particular. But you never know, and it's good to have a backup even at the punter spot.
Punters are people too.
Yes, they are.
Last couple, USC cornerback Christian Roland Wallace and Old Dominion defensive end Jalen White McLean.
White McLean's interesting. Didn't get a whole lot of Old Dominion film, but you can see a trait or two that you like. I'm trying to make sure. Roland Wallace was a guy that, unfortunately, while you played a big program, and I think I did see him make some plays on tape, the athleticism just isn't there. Matrix 39 in this class. I think he's going to have a pretty uphill battle to try to make even the camp roster.
Well, and if you go look at what Kansas City did in the draft, generally speaking, they are very high on athleticism. So I would imagine that he's just a camp body, but that's something we'll watch. For right now, those are all the guys that we know of that have been signed as UDFAs. There are, like I said earlier, probably 10 to 12 more that we've been seeing that have been reported for rookie minicamp tryouts, including, obviously a quarterback, a kicker, and all the other positions, but they have to fill and be able to practice for that rookie minicamp that will be coming up. So lots more to talk about over the next couple of weeks. We're probably going to I think we need to get into this draft class a little bit more and do some deeper dives into these players. And I think we'll get into that over this next week or two.
Oh, yeah. We're going to dig deep on a number of aspects of all, especially the big guys that have to compete for starting jobs that we can project. But we will cover this class in its depth. Be here for it, along with any other news. Brett Veach is going to churn right now. Every stone being unturned means if a draft pick is let go for some reason, we've seen it happen before, even before OTAs. If the UDFA churn happens, if veterans get released, it's all going to be happening. We're going to have it all for you. So make sure you're on the text line.
Go ahead. Say the text line.
816-357-8781. You can get on our text line. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. I just was going to say that I think that's the big one that isn't normally something that Kansas City can be looking at right now is there anybody that teams are looking at possibly releasing or wanting to trade away? Kansas City has cap space that they don't normally have. And in reality, they also have an extra draft pick for next year. So something to watch there.
I mean, can we talk to John Lynch since he, traded with us? The phones apparently work. Can I get Ayuk for a hamburger, please?
Yeah. I'd give up that third for Snead for Ayuk right now.
You and me both. I mean, I'd go a lot farther than that. He's worth a first-round pick. Let's be real.
Oh, no. I understand. I'm just having fun. Yeah.
But I like the way you're thinking. Yeah. Always offer lower than you're willing to go, of course. Basic negotiation. I'm with you. All right, folks. Let us know what you think of this UDFA class. Oh, yeah, there's that part too. Forgot it. Well, see, this is what I do. I could just be like, yes, he'll fit on the roster. We can get him on the field. Go talk to Chris about making him fit the cap. There. That's how we work.
Oh, they have the money. That's the fun part.
Well, let's see what they get after, folks. Let us know what you think of what's your final grade or feeling on the draft class itself and anybody on the UDFAs that stick out. Are you with me? Fullback and defensive line or where we're looking at. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Please leave your comments down below. Make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell. Get on the audio side on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. And anywhere you can get a podcast, you can get us free 5 days a week plus. We're going to have a fun time here. We don't go anywhere, though. 5 days a week, all year long, you will find us. Thanks for being with us today.